Mic should be on. Is it coming through?
Yeah, I'm getting it here.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Idaho Falls. My name is Annette Lovell, and we are bringing you today's service with our guest speaker Jim Francis and our media tech Vic Allen. There's not very many of us today, but come on in. So we are called together to worship as a community. We are called to set aside distractions and anxieties that we might actually touch deeper springs and be renewed at our center. We are called to seek and to share comfort for the hurts. We are called to desire more love, more justice, life more abundant. We are called for truth, to mercy, to humility, and to courage. And that's a lot to work toward. That's a lot to expect of ourselves, our fellow neighbors, our friends, and it can be pretty daunting. So even though we strive to be all that we want to be and that we hope to be, I also just want to say simple welcome here today and hope that by the end of the service, we've given you something to think about, to ponder, and maybe, just maybe, give you something to take home that you can absorb into your life and make you a better person on whichever pathway you're on. So, welcome to everyone. We will start with a few announcements. First, a quick welcome to those of us joining online. It's really nice that we can offer both options, online and in-person services. So if you're online, send us a quick note in your chat box. Here in the sanctuary, joys and concerns need to be written on a piece of paper located at the back. They will be turned in a little while in the service, and we will share those from the pulpit. If you're online again, put them in the chat box. We'll try to grab them from there. Anita Carpenter is moving soon, and she will be very missed from this congregation. So today, about 2 o'clock at the Olive Garden, there is a little gathering to send her off. You can RSVP to Layla Chambers, or stop and say a quick goodbye and farewell. In a similar note, Dennis Jorgensen is leaving us and moving away. He's going to become a new resident of Mesquite, Nevada, and we wish him well. As a surprise, he and his longtime partner Steve are going to get married today after the service, before he moves. So, if you can stay after the service, it would be lovely to be able to give them a celebration before they depart. And who doesn't like a wedding, right? The book group is commencing a new book, so if you're interested in the book club, now's a perfect time to find out the reading material. They will not be meeting until mid-May, so you'll have time to be able to read the book before they get together. And the Philosophical Society is meeting Wednesday, April 19th at 7 o'clock here at the church. The topic is The Absurd by Thomas, Nagel? So anyone interested in the Philosophy Society? There's a lot always going on. One last note, please silence your cell phones. It is very distracting if they go off. So let us start the morning by taking just a few minutes to sit in stillness, to breathe deeply together, and I will ring the peace bowl 3 times. We'll begin with our prelude. So let us recite our covenant together that we have chosen to represent our commitment to this congregation and to one another. The words are in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And our chalice lighting is an important ritual in the UU faith. We engage in this ritual before any important gathering, especially on our Sunday services. People throughout the faith read the symbolism in a variety of ways, but most of us agree that the flame represents that divine light found in each one of us and in all of the creatures of this earth, and that the chalice represents the earth that is holding us and supporting us. So the words this morning for our chalice lighting come from Sarah Eileen Lawal. She says, out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and that all there is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames we rise. And our opening song this morning is page 85, Although This Life is But a Wraith. This song is not very familiar to this congregation, but it's a simple tune. I'm sure we can handle it. But before we sing together, first of all, we'd like to welcome back June Cannon as our talented musician today. She has not been with us since COVID started, so we definitely want to welcome her. June, will you play the piece through once so everyone can hear the way it sounds? And then we're going to try it. Page 85. Everyone, please rise if you're comfortable and able. Well, we've done better, haven't we? At least we tried. Mardee's going to share our time for all ages.
Good morning. This morning I have a short book called Rosa by Nikki Giovanni, illustrated by Brian Collier. Mrs. Parks was having a good day. Mother was getting over that touch of flu and was up this morning for breakfast at the table. Her husband, Raymond Parks, one of the best barbers in the county, had been asked to take on extra work at the Air Force Base. And the first day of December was always special because you could just feel Christmas in the air. Now everybody knew the alterations department would soon be very, very busy. Mrs. Parks would laugh each year with the other seamstresses and say that those elves in the North Pole have nothing on us. The women of Montgomery, both young and older, would come in with their fancy holiday dresses that needed adjustments, or their Sunday suits and blouses that needed just a touch, a flower, or some velvet trimming, or something to make the ladies look festive. Rosa Parks was the best seamstress. The needle and thread flew through her hands like the gold spinning from Rumpelstiltskin's loom. The other seamstresses would tease Rosa Parks and say she used magic. Not magic, just concentration, she would say. Some days, she would skip lunch to be finished on time. This Thursday, they had gotten a bit ahead of their schedule. "Why don't you go on home, Rosa?" said the supervisor. "I know your mother's feeling poorly, and you might want to look in on her." The supervisor knew Rosa would stay until the work was done, but it was only December 1st. No need to push. Rosa appreciated that. Now she could get home early, and since Raymond was working late, maybe she would surprise him with a meatloaf, his favorite. "See you in the morning." Rosa waved goodbye and headed for the bus stop. She fiddled in her pocket for the dime so that she would not have to ask for change. When she stepped up to drop her fare in, she was smiling in anticipation of the nice dinner she would make. As was the evil custom, she then got off the bus and went to the back door to enter the bus from the rear. Rosa saw that the section reserved for blacks was full, but she noticed the neutral section, the part of the bus where blacks or whites could sit, had free seats. The left side of the aisle had 2 seats on the right, and on the right side a man was sitting next to the window. Rosa decided to sit next to him. She did not remember his name, but she knew his face. His son Jimmy came frequently to the NAACP Youth Council affairs. They exchanged pleasantries as the bus pulled away from the curb. Rosa settled her sewing bag and her purse near her knees, trying not to crowd Jimmy's father. "Men take up more space," she was thinking as she tried to squish her packages closer. The bus made several more stops, and the 2 seats opposite her were filled by blacks. She sat on her side of the aisle, daydreaming about her good day and planning her special meal for her husband. "I said, give me those seats," the bus driver bellowed. Mrs. Parks looked up in surprise. The 2 men on the opposite side of the aisle were rising to move into the crowded black section. Jimmy's father muttered, "I don't feel like trouble today. I'm going to leave." Mrs. Parks stood to let him out. She looked at James Blake, the bus driver, and then sat back down. You better make it easy on yourself, Blake yelled. Why do you pick on us? Mrs. Parks asked with that quiet strength of hers. I'm going to call the police, Blake threatened. Do what you must, Mrs. Parks quietly replied. She was not frightened. She was not going to give in to that which was wrong. Now, some of the white people were saying aloud, she ought to be arrested and take her off this bus. Some of the black people, recognizing the potential for ugliness, got off the bus. Others stayed on, saying, this is the neutral section. She has a right to be there. Mrs. Parks sat. As Mrs. Parks sat, waiting for the police to come, she thought of all the brave men and women, boys and girls who stood tall for civil rights. She recited in her mind the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision, in which the United States Supreme Court ruled that separate is inherently unequal. She sighed as she realized she was tired. Not tired from work, but tired of putting white people first, tired of stepping off sidewalks to let white people pass, and tired of eating at separate lunch counters and learning at separate schools. She was tired of colored entrances, colored balconies, colored drinking fountains, and colored taxis. She was tired of getting somewhere first and being waited on last. Tired of separate, and definitely tired of not equal. She thought about her mother and her grandmother and knew they would want her to be strong. When the policeman bent down to ask, Auntie, are you going to move? All of the strength of all the people through all those many years joined in her. Rosa Parks said no. Now, Joanne Robinson was at the Piggly Wiggly grocery store when she learned of the arrest. She had stopped in to purchase a box of macaroni and cheese. She always served macaroni and cheese when she baked red snapper for dinner. A sister member of the Women's Political Council approached her just as she reached the checkout line. Not Mrs. Parks, Mrs. Robinson exclaimed. She then looked furtively around. Pass the word that everybody should meet me at my office at 10 o'clock tonight, she said. Mrs. Robinson was also Dr. Robinson, a professor at Alabama State, the college designated for colored people, and she was the newly elected president of the Women's Political Council. She rushed home to put dinner on the table, cleaned up the kitchen, and put the kids to bed. She kissed her husband goodbye and hurried to the college. It was dark when they finally gathered. The 25 women first held hands in prayer in hopes that they were doing the right thing. After all, they were going to use the stencil maker, printer, and paper of Alabama State without permission. If they were caught at the college, they could all be arrested for trespassing. But they were working to undermine a vicious law. They decided they would stand under the umbrella of courage Rosa Parks had offered, keeping off the rains of fear and disgust. The women quickly formed groups to carry out each task. Making the stencils was the most difficult because the machine keys had to be struck very hard so that the letters would be clearly readable. If a mistake was made, the whole page had to be thrown out. It took a lot of concentration. The posters read, "No riders today. Support Mrs. Parks. Stay off the buses. Walk on Monday." The women made enough posters for almost every citizen of color in Montgomery. The next morning, as people read the posters, they remembered the joy they felt when the Supreme Court declared that separate was not equal. They were sure that once the highest court in the land had spoken, they would not be treated so badly. But that was not the case. Soon after the ruling, Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy in Money, Mississippi, was viciously lynched. At his funeral, more than 100,000 people mourned with his mother. She left his casket open, saying, "I want the world to see what they did to my boy." Now, only weeks after his killers were freed, Rosa Parks had taken a courageous stand. The people were ready to stand with her. They came together in a great mass meeting. The Women's Political Council, the NAACP, and all the churches. They needed someone to speak for them, to give voice to the injustice. Well, everyone agreed that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. would be ideal. "We'll stay off the buses," Dr. King intoned. "We will walk until the justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream." And the people walked. They walked in the rain. They walked in the hot sun. They walked early in the morning. They walked late at night. They walked at Christmas. They walked at Easter. They walked on the 4th of July. They walked on Labor Day. They walked on Thanksgiving. And then it was almost Christmas again. They still walked. People from all over the United States sent shoes and coats and money so that the citizens of Montgomery could walk. Everyone was proud of their nonviolent movement, and the sole force that bound the community together would sustain many marchers for the years of struggle that were yet to come. On November 13th, 1956, almost a year after the arrest of Rosa Parks, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that segregation on the buses, like segregation at schools, was illegal. Segregation was wrong. Rosa Parks said no, so that the Supreme Court could remind the nation that the Constitution of the United States makes no provision for second-class citizenship. We are all equal under the law and are all entitled to its protection. Big page. The integrity, the dignity, the quiet strength of Rosa Parks turned her no into a yes for change.
Thank you, Mardi. That was a perfect segue into our sermon today. It is time for our children to go up to their classes upstairs if they want to follow Mardi and any other teachers that might be going up. We're not going to sing them out. We're just going to invite them out. Yeah. So we have a special guest with us today, Mr. Jim Francis. Jim was a public school history teacher specializing in U.S., European, and Chinese history for about 37 years and retired in 2011. He continued his love of teaching as an educator at Idaho State University for another 6 years after that. Jim believes that one of the most important purposes of studying history is to explore the complexities and meaning of democracy. During his years as an educator, he felt that giving the students the tools for analytical decision-making and to put oneself in historical situations was much more important than memorizing dates and places and people. Agree? Students needed to understand that what the roles of citizens and government are in a democratic society. Jim is currently a member of the Idaho Falls City Council, and as always, we are thrilled to have him with us here today. So we will turn the time over to Jim Francis.
Thank you, Annette. A few things to set up first. One does not teach in a suit coat. Nor with sleeves fully. Today, though, the sun is shining. Yes. The chalice is lit. There's hope. Not just that winter might end, but that things might change in the bigger picture. I set up for a second here. Okay, that's better. 60 years ago today, Martin Luther King was in jail. And he started writing a letter, which, whether he knew it or not, he was tackling 3 troublesome words: democracy, religion, and patriotism. So wait. What's a troublesome word? Words that we commonly use and encounter in our daily lives, in reading and in the media. Words which we conveniently allow to have multiple definitions. But maybe the real trouble with these words is that we refuse to define them. In the words of the song, we may get buried in the sleek contentment of not defining those words. And if we don't define them, then they can mean anything we want them to mean. That's troubling in a democracy. Well, wait. I just used one of those words, and I didn't define it. So you're going to have to stay tuned, because I'm going to get there, but it's going to take a little bit. I see what you mean about the microphone. So, King tackles these troublesome words, and he has written this letter from Birmingham Jail, which he started writing on this very day 60 years ago. It's a seminal document in the canon of United States democracy, right up there with Declaration of Independence, Gettysburg Address. But in order to explain what he came up with in that letter about these 3 words, I have to set a little context. So we're going to back up to the spring of 1963, before he was arrested. And at the time, in the words of the historian Diane McWhorter, who spoke in Idaho Falls a few years ago at the Humanities Council dinner, Birmingham was a totalitarian state for blacks. They lived in essentially a stateless society. Law was not for protection. And no line existed between police leadership and the violent Ku Klux Klansmen. This was the essence of the Jim Crow South. Now, on April 15th, the nemesis of the struggle for equality, Bull Connor, Commissioner of Public Safety in Birmingham, had arrested King and fellow minister Ralph Abernathy, both of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Actually, they'd set themselves up to get arrested. That's what they wanted to have happen, because the hope was that they could stimulate or revitalize kind of a movement in Birmingham, the protest marches, and the movement was beginning to lose enthusiasm. Actually, it was beginning to lose bodies of people willing to go to jail. And remember, when an adult goes to jail, that's the end of the income in that family. So this is a big deal. Like with Rosa Parks. So the idea was, all right, King and Abernathy get arrested, they're in jail, and it would enhance the pressure on the Kennedy administration to do something to address the issue of segregation, which had not happened at that point. And it would also, they hoped, get more press coverage that would, again, revitalize, stimulate people to come back and keep protesting, keep marching, even though they were being arrested. Because Connor's tactics, fire hoses, police dogs, mass arrests of protesters, had drained the energy from the movement. I'd say in simple terms, what you had here is a clash of two different definitions of democracy, King's and Connor's. Because remember, everything that made Rosa Parks tired was legal, had been passed by city and state ordinances and statutes. That was the law. Connor was enforcing the law. So King, on April 16th, this anniversary date, when he was in jail, began writing a letter justifying what he was doing and how he saw it as legal. Now, in order to set a little bit of the context, I need a little historical fiction. So over here, we have a group of moderate opposition, people that were opposed to Connor and King, moderates. And over here, I'll get Dr. King in a minute. So, first the moderates. Dr. King, we 8 members of the clergy, men of the cloth, have taken out a newspaper ad in the Birmingham News expressing to this community our criticism of you and your work in Birmingham. But we want to say even more that was in that ad. There you are, Dr. King. In jail, in your work shirt. But we know who you really are. You're an outsider. You don't belong in Birmingham. As an outsider, we know you will walk away from whatever you do or don't accomplish. and you'll go back to Atlanta. And we, the people of Birmingham, white and black, will be left to pick up the pieces of the pottery that you have broken. We, as clergymen, have our flocks to protect and lead. There are souls to be saved. You divide the flock. Besides, you are teaching people a disrespect for law and order. Mark our words. The time will come when attacks on our nation's government will be excused as civil disobedience and civil discourse. You are setting the stage for disaster. The police and the firefighters of Birmingham are showing restraint in attempting to uphold the law. We can agree with your goals. There's no problem there. But why can't you wait for the system to bring change? It's gradual, but we have just elected a new government made up of moderates who want to solve the problems here in Birmingham, and they need time. Well, I don't often answer my critics. But because I take you seriously, I'm going to answer you. I don't have any real paper to write on, so I have to begin in the margins of a newspaper that a jail trustee just sneaked into me illegally. And I would say this to you. I write this letter out of respect toward you. I am in Birmingham because injustice is in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. We can wait no longer for justice. We've already waited 350 years. And you misunderstand me and the people with me who are struggling for equality in this city. But more than that equality and justice, it is in this nation that we struggle for. Nonviolent direct action is founded on the deepest respect for law, built on the core meanings of democracy and religion. And those core meanings are the real foundations of patriotism in our republic. And I'm certainly troubled by your churches and synagogues with what messages flow from your pulpits and your buildings. Okay, that's it for historical fiction. I have to go back to being me. Because now I'm going to try to extrapolate from what King said and bring it down to definitions of those words, those three troubling words. Because I think he touched on the definition that we have to use as the fixed definition in all of our conversations. You can read the letter. It's long. Because that trustee sneaked a whole lot of paper into the jail for him to write on after he started in the newspaper margins. But as my students used to say, Mr. Francis, that's a long letter. That's a lot of homework. But he had something to say, didn't he? That's all a teacher needs. That's all you need. A little feedback from the kids. Today, though, I don't want to restate his message in the letter or summarize it. That's for you to read. Instead, I want to touch on a simplified version of transcendentalism and explain a deep theme that runs through the United States history. And really, that theme defines these three words. That is, the United States was founded on an idea, not earthly reality, but a transcendent idea above the reality. You see, the founding document was not the Constitution. The founding document was the Declaration of Independence, which in its original form included a clause against slavery. Now, they took it out to make a union, but when Jefferson wrote it in the original draft, there's a very clear statement against slavery and about equality of all peoples. And the Declaration, in its accessible language we can get a hold of, defines very clearly the role of democracy, the role of government in a democracy. Protect equality, protect human rights, and protect the safety and happiness of the society as a whole. Now you see there's a conflict there. Because to protect the society as a whole means a sacrifice of some of those individual rights. And if you go too far in this direction, you could have a police state and you'll have safety. But you won't have these rights. And if you go too far in this direction, you have rights, but you don't necessarily have the safety and happiness of the whole society. And you see the problem there? Right in that middle ground, that's justice. Finding the balance between those two, that's justice. Oh, wow, I keep getting down this line because now I got another word to define. Thank you, Dr. King. I can bail out of that one. What is justice? And what is a just law? Well, basically, as King pointed out, it's not a set of laws passed by state legislatures and signed by governor. Nope. Segregation was required by the law of Alabama. As I said, everything that made Rosa Parks tired was legal. In April 1963, Congress had not passed the Civil Rights Act. In fact, the Kennedy administration had not yet introduced it to Congress. It was not the law, and the court rulings were not justice either. King was in jail for violating a court order establishing an injunction against the protest. If law passed by elected officials and court rulings issued by judges are not by definition personification of the word democracy, then what is? Answer from King. 1, just law uplifts the human personality, the human soul, and the dignity of all. It is human rights. 2, just law applies equally to the majority and the minority. Majority rule is not democracy. Minority rule is not democracy. It is equality that is justice. 3rd, just law squares with moral law and the law of God. In other words, the writers of the Declaration of Independence and Harriet Tubman defended democracy. The writers of the Constitution defended something else, union. They're not the same. So the transcendent truth of democracy is justice as King defined it. This universal definition exists in the transcendent truth that overrides all of us. It has to be foundational in our discourse, that definition. Otherwise, we get Connor, I'm defending democracy. We get King, I'm defending democracy. Only one of those can be right. And you can't manipulate that word back and forth to be convenient, which is very convenient for a politician. So what we have then, since it's a transcendent truth, we always have in front of us an unfinished business, making that word democracy as justice real. But there's where the theme is in our history. Because, as I said, the Declaration, that is transcendent truth. And where do you see it next? Most clearly, Gettysburg Address. Because if you look at it, what does Lincoln say? He said it's for us, the living, to be dedicated to the unfinished business of liberty and equality for all. It's in the poetic restatement of the Gettysburg Address by Martin Luther King in August of 1963, after the Birmingham protest. And it's in the poetic eloquence of Amanda Gorman on January 20th, 1921, in the poem, The Hill We Climb. She reminds us that we are a country committed to all cultures, all colors, all characters, and all conditions of men. And we are a nation simply unfinished. The road to the transcendent truth is endless. And of course, for King, when he made those statements about justice, he brought around, we've got to define the word religion. It was not about otherworldly salvation of souls. It was not about buildings, or in his words, the anesthetizing security of stained glass windows. It was not about silence in the face of injustice, nor about sanctimonious trivialities inside the sanctuary of Sunday services. Could anybody else do an alliteration like that? While injustice swirls around the outside walls of the churches. Whew. If I could only write like that. In jail, no less, he wrote that. Anyway, all right, sorry, side note. Instead, the essence of religion and the purpose of church for King can be summarized as an encounter with the transcendent covenant that unites humanity as equals. I made that up. That's an extrapolation. I hope he'd be okay with that. Religion must be ecclesiastic, in the Greek terms, of a gathering of those summoned. Summoned to what? Summoned to justice, to human relations. That's religion. We have to loose from the paralyzing change of conformity. That's King. And enter the struggle for democratic human relations. That's religion. Which brings us to a defining patriotism. Oh, what a word. I would submit that it has a unique meaning in the United Statesian Democratic Republic. Because as King states both explicitly and implicitly throughout the letter, we have to accept a most troublesome point of all in the founding of this republic. We were not founded on loyalty to country. We were not founded on a common language. We were not founded on a common history. We were diverse from the beginning. We weren't founded on a common nationality. We were founded on this set of ideas about justice that stood as truths. This set of ideas, that's our unity. And it always has been grounded in the path of a future possibility, not in going backward, nor ever accepting a present that measured up short of the ultimate truths of the definition of democracy, which King put in those 3 statements about justice. Loyalty to a person, loyalty to a presidential decision, loyalty to a status quo of injustice, loyalty to a political party, none of those things are the essence of patriotism. Now, look what King did. He gave a list of patriots. Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, a minister in Birmingham, who had been beaten, bombed, jailed for an unwavering, confrontational demand for equality of integration in Birmingham. James Meredith, who risked his life to integrate the University of Mississippi. The bus boycotters of Montgomery, who sacrificed their time, their wages, and accepted abuse from 55 into 56. 11 months. If I extend King's words to pattern in U.S. history, then, patriotism is founded on the struggle to resist unjust laws. And that was done by thousands of slaves, runaways, those who broke tools, those who, oh, massa, I thought it was a weed, because every dead cotton plant was one less to pick. That's resistance. That is patriotism. Patriotism was exhibited, personified by the abolitionists who created an underground railroad, by the Susan B. Anthonys who voted illegally in the 1800s, by the Alice Pauls who picketed the White House in 1917, demanding voting rights for women, and accepted the pain of hunger strikes and forced feeding when they were arrested. And by 15-year-old Elizabeth Eckford, verbally abused, threatened with lynching by a mob, and deliberately denied protection by the National Guardsmen who were upholding law and order. Eckford was one of 9 black students in attempting to break down the injustice of segregation in Little Rock. The Renaissance and Reformation scholar, Erasmus, this is the advantage of teaching European history and U.S. history. Yes, I love that. Spoke of the difference between substance and formalism. Religious leaders that King criticized, who hid behind their stained glass and their salvation of their flocks, had a form of religion without substance. Formalism is in the show of patriotism, in pledges and salutes to flags and countries, and in national anthems. But those are the formalisms of patriotism, the form. The substance is something else. It's the struggle to establish justice in the transcendent covenant that unites humanity as equals. That is democracy. In the end, the word is not troublesome. It's the work to make democracy reality that is troublesome and often inconvenient.
Well, did he give you something to think about? Thank you, Jim. It is time for our morning offering. This can include, we grow as we give of ourselves. This can include giving of our time, our abilities, and our finances. So we are very blessed to have a place like this church where we are encouraged to share all of the above. So our lives are so full and busy, it doesn't seem to ever slow down. And sometimes this is wonderful because we are celebrating life in this world, but often we're also battling emotions and health issues and pain for loved ones, and truly all the aspects of what it means to be alive. So our joys and concerns are very important to us. It gives us a chance to share our joys, our pains, our light, and our darkness. So we will take a few moments to share. First of all, Vic, are there anything in the chat box? Okay. Well, we have a joy from Emily Thomas. She's graduating college in 2 weeks. Yay! Very good. We have a joy from Pam. She says, welcome Ashley, Emily, and Sophia. So welcome. Ashley, that's the first one, yeah. And we have a joy and a concern from Dennis Jorgensen. He says, with him moving to Mesquite, he still has not found home for 3 of his cats. So that is a concern, and if there's any way that you could adopt or foster some little fur babies, he'd appreciate it. Yeah. And we will light one more candle for those joys and concerns which we choose not to share at this time. Our closing song, much easier. It is page 121, We'll Build a Land, We Know It Well. So again, please stand as you are willing and able. always such a delight to have with us, and we appreciate his willingness to be here. Our closing words come from Eileen Corpelis. She says, "If that which is most holy lies within the human person, and if the greatest power in the world shines flickering and uncertain from each individual heart, then it is easy to see the value of human associations dedicated to nurturing that light, the couple, the family, and the religious community. For the power of good in any one of us must at times waver, but when a group together is dedicated to nurturing the power of good, it is rare for the light to grow dim in all individuals at the same moment. So we borrow courage and wisdom from one another to warm us and to keep us until we are together again." So let us extinguish our flame of our chalice and read with me the words in the order of service. "We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace, be safe, and be well." It is time for our prelude.